Yes. Good evening and welcome everybody to this licensing committee meeting, 13th of January 2026. So Happy New Year to all of you. And I'm going to start by taking the apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies? No, I don't see any. Okay, so if there's no apologies, then does anyone have declaration of interest? No. Okay, then can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting we held on the 8th of October 2025?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move straight on to the update on the licensing policy hearing and enforcement. And that Graham Edward is going to give this update. Graham, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Good evening. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. For a short introduction of me, I've been in post at LBE for 18 months now as the compliance and enforcement team lead. So I work with Isabella. And if you're not aware of the makeup of the team, our team at Ealing Council, it's myself as the lead, and I have 3 enforcement officers to help, to assist. You probably know or have seen Robert Deere, who's been in post for quite some time, Shane Elliott and Kieran Call. So that makes up our team. It's a small team, and we are extremely busy. What I intend to do is run through the enforcement update for this reporting period. I'm not going to read word for word. I'm sure you've seen what's in your agenda pack anyway, but I'll sort of summarise as we go, and please do feel free to jump in with questions. It might be easier if we do that at the end, but and myself and or Isabella, I'm sure will try and answer any questions that you might have. So I'll take it through as you see it on the report, and you as the licensing committee, the licensing committee are only too well aware that the legal framework for licensing is the licensable activities, sale of alcohol by retail, late night refreshment and regulated entertainment. But I think it's also important that I add that this isn't just the work that my team conducts. It's what you will see when you sit, and it's what you will decide and determine on, as well as temporary event notices, maybe objections through police and Metropolitan Police or the Environmental Health, personal license revocations, etc., applications, and also applications through the Gambling Act 2005. But in addition to that, we have a large amount of work that comes through from explosive regulation, which is predominantly fireworks, which is particularly pertinent around religious festivals, as you well know, in Southall, and we do become very busy over that period. We also licensed the animal welfare, I think 2006, I believe, which does provide, again, a lot of work for us, does take up some time. What I've noticed has increased, and what was surprising when coming into post, was the amount of regulation around dog boarding, home boarding. That's really increased. So we regulate that as well. We have massage and special treatment licensing, which speaks for itself. Your massage premises, tattooists, nail bars, etc. And that, again, certain time of the year when those licenses renew, which is coming up shortly, that's a large chunk for us. And not forgetting scrap metal, which is a little bit smaller for us because we don't have many on the borough. So the reason why I wanted to mention this is because we really do, as a small unit, need to prioritise our work, how we conduct and what we do throughout the year. Part of this priority and part of our, I would call proactive work is conducted through late night visits, which is something I advocate, and I think it's very important for us. We can't only be reactive. You know, we have daily, almost daily amount of service requests that come over our desk, which all need to be investigated, all need to be inspected. But of course, we can't ignore proactive work. We try as a team, I try as a team to conduct proactive, I'll like to call them inspections rather than visits, throughout the borough, mainly intelligence-led, but of course it can be sporadic and just attending. I'll try to do this, we try to do this at least once a month. That's not always able, but once a month I think it is kind of a level or a bar that I've set, and we've had some great results out of it. And we are looking to be going out again this week. So in the reporting period that we're associated with now, I believe it's from September to present, we did mainly on these late night visits, visited 23 venues. Out of these 23, 3 venues were found operating without a valid temporary event notice. They received a warning, and 2 premises out of these 3, 2 other premises have now since applied for a license. So in essence, they were operating not in accordance with the license. So they have now applied. So we've achieved compliance. And a 3rd venue is no longer offering licensed activities, which, well, basically they were again operating not in accordance. So that has been sorted. And moving on down, there's 2 further alcohol-led venues found to be they were breaching their conditions, despite warnings given, and formal action plans were set. I think it's very quickly important for me to talk a little bit, very quickly, about the mindset, the philosophy of enforcement. Really, we follow the 182 guidance, Home Office guidance, and our enforcement is very much on a stepped approach. So the key to that, and what I really believe in, the key to that is early interaction. So when a premise does come to notice, and it could be through a number of means, either through MPS, a crime, through the public, it's key that we interact early. We get in early, and predominantly at the outset really is almost, I'd say, to assist the venue to achieve compliance. Now, compliance doesn't always have to be achieved by enforcement, by review. There's lots of work that goes in prior to even coming to a review. And I think that's important because it is a step-tiered approach. So part of our ongoing work, which we continue and we have done since I've been in post, and Ealing had been doing long before I was here, is test purchases, which excellent tool, intelligence-led again, and we've try to do 1 a quarter at the moment. If we can, we utilise the services of the dogs, the sniff dogs, which is being particularly pertinent on this period we're dealing with now, our last inspections, which was in October. And we had I believe it was a dual purpose dog that day, so they can detect tobacco, illicit tobacco and cash. And it was particularly pertinent that day because, as we often find with these venues, hidden contraband is often behind a false wall, for instance, plasterboard wall, or it's very cleverly secreted. And we had an indication from the dog, and again, without the dog, we wouldn't have known because it was hidden, and moving a few things around and opening a door and crawling on our hands and knees, we opened up into a room which you could stand in, where the illicit tobacco and goods were being stored. That was a good particularly I say a good day. It's a good day in respect of work, but we had a total seizures that day of over 58,000 individual cigarettes, which equates to 2,900 odd packets of 20 cigarettes, 330 vapes, which were again illicit, nearly 30 kilograms of shisha, and 6.5 kilograms of hand rolling tobacco. We often find with the shisha, it is often seized due to the high level of duty and tax. If you're not aware, my recollection is 190, maybe slightly more duty paid per kilo. So the duty on shisha is high, and that is a temptation to avoid the duty speaks for itself. So with us and trading standards often sees that, and it's as I mentioned, trading standards. It's good for me to note that a lot of all of our enforcement visits are conducted with trading standards and or MPS. So it's a real joint approach and a great collective achievement on that day in October. If I move swiftly on to some of our public, have I got a hand up? No, excuse me, I've just heard my computer made a noise at me. I thought a hand up. I'll push on. Public health funded work. Isabella may have already spoken about this, and she may choose to today. She may not. But this is a fund that we have from Public Health to assist us, and our focus from public health funding is purely on alcohol-led venues, and I would say the off-trade is what we've been concentrating on, off-license trade, alcohol-led venues, and we conduct can be intelligence-led, often just
I'll let you cover it with your license.
Oh, sorry, I'll carry on. I thought it might be a question. Where was I? Yes, so intelligence-led visits, but of course can be sporadic. And in this reporting period, again going from September to now, we recorded 38 off-license visits were targeted, and again they received some various breaches of licenses. I won't go into too much detail. It's things like high strength conditions being breached, alcohol being stored on floors, no single can sales, that type of thing that we highlight. An issue, just because a venue is an off trade doesn't mean we don't issue formal action plans, which they need to adhere to, and of course we follow up on our action plans, and should we not get compliance, we can stepped approach, we can go to our next step. So these follow-up visits are planned, they continue, they're ongoing, planned throughout the year, and ultimately our collective gain is to achieve compliance. Moving on swiftly to reviews, at the end of this short presentation, I will refer to the Annex 1 and 2 in your bundle, which does highlight the hearings and reviews, but for now I'm just going to briefly touch upon it. Again, most of our reviews come by intelligence-led reports, could be from infancy, from service requests or public, Crime Stoppers, etc., and Metropolitan Police. And we've, again, from September, this reporting period, several, I wouldn't give you the exact number, but more than several, but quite a few number of off-licence venues were targeted across the borough. Again, sporadic, really. Same with test purchasing. If you concentrate on one particular area, as you could well imagine, word gets out pretty quick, and before you know it, everybody's talking to everybody, and it becomes a little bit harder. So we tend to spread ourselves across the whole borough. As a result of these inspections, quite a lot of contraband was seized and has been seized, mainly illicit alcohol, vapes, and tobacco. And that is kind of the work, really. What we're seeing all the time is vapes have certainly increased the amount of vapes we're seizing, and as I say, shisha. So I've been I'm working in Ealing Borough prior to being in an LBE for many years now, so maybe 15 years. And the late night comedy has certainly evolved, and I'm sure you've all seen this too. And what I've seen the increase in certainly is the quite a large increase really in late night refreshment venues, some of which are licensed, some are not, and also shisha establishments. There's certainly a more in certain areas of the borough, they're quite prevalent, and they do take up. Although of course shisha is not a licensable activity, some of them are licensed for licensable activities, and it does require attendance. And lastly, all I'll say is it's our continued commitment, really, as the licensing and enforcement compliance team. What we're trying to achieve with our partners, police, responsible authorities, interested parties, is compliance. That's what we're all trying to achieve, is compliance. And having said with that, we've had, I believe, I'm just checking my notes, 5 reviews, 5 licensing reviews since September on this reporting period, which brings me on to, lastly, the Appendix 1 and 2, if you do have your in front of you. I have. And these just really are highlighting the subcommittee's decisions since end of September to present date. So you've had, and these are ones that obviously you as a committee have determined and sat on. New premises license, you've had one which has been granted, and also one variation of premises license and transfer of change of DPS. We have 2 reviews, which I can talk about, because you, I'm sure, appreciate I don't want to talk about things that are pending and things that are matters that are going to be across to be determined shortly. 2 I can there, and they were both revoked, and you'll, as a committee, will, I'm sure, be aware of those. There hasn't been any temporary event notice objections. As you're aware, the authorities that can do that are the Metropolitan Police and the Environmental Health. So in total, there's been, as a committee, as a leading subcommittee, 4 decisions made in this reporting period. And lastly, Annex 2 is just a summary of the reviews that have occurred. And you'll notice that the vote license, you will see, I don't know whether you have the reports in front of you, but JK Convenience Store, I can talk about these because these have been determined. License was revoked. That's in Greenford. And KK Food and Wine, which is also an off license in Southall, that license was revoked as well. The last 2 on there are grants of licenses, new licenses, one in Greenford Broadway and one in Southall. I hope I haven't whizzed through that too quickly or taken too long. Either way, really happy to take questions, and I'm sure Isabella is too. Thanks very much, Chair.
No, you're doing wonderful. And those who don't know Graham Atwood, Graham was lead member of licensing police, and he has a good knowledge and understanding of the licensing, Ealing licensing, and that is clearly reflected in your report, Graham. Thank you for this very comprehensive report. I heard that we are using sniffing dogs for visits. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a common occurrence. We used that tactic a lot in the Metropolitan Police. and obviously the local authority now continue it because it achieves great results.
So how do they spot non-duty paid items when you go and visit, or is it just to find where the tobacco or things are hidden?
Exactly that. Yes, of course they can't determine whether a duty's been paid, but they can certainly have amazing noses and they can sniff through false walls and give us an indication of where contraband. It may not be contraband, of course, but at least something which is hidden behind a false wall, 9 times out of 10, it shouldn't be there. So that's where the dogs certainly come into their own.
Thank you. I'm going to open to floor for questions. And I have Gareth, Councillor Shaw. Okay, start, Councillor Shaw, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Graham, for that report. That's excellent. One of the questions I did have was actually about the dogs and whether the use of the dogs is more widespread now, and is this a greater resource coming from the police and our partners when they're visiting licensing premises or licensed premises, or is this something that the council officers are doing? So if you could just clarify that, please, that'll be helpful. And the second question was just in looking at the contraband that's been confiscated in there. It's noticeable that there seems to have been a bit of a decline in illicit pharmaceuticals. That I'd say, I mean, most commonly sitting on these panels, when there is a raid, usually in with all of this, if there's non-duty paid goods and so on, it very frequently there are large amounts of illicit pharmaceuticals of various types, things that have been brought in from abroad and are being sold under the counter. So I was just wondering, is that a pattern or a decline? Because it hasn't been, it's seemed to be something that's been increasing, I'd have said, over the last couple of years, and yet now, it's not within the report, or whether it just happens to be that's how it's gone from the premises that have been raided, in this last quarter. Obviously, it is just a snapshot of the last quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Shaw. To answer the questions in order, the first question, particularly about the use of dogs, it's actually the opposite. Many years ago, whilst in the Metropolitan Police, we had the use of dogs quite frequently. You probably read about it in news, current cuts, etc. The Metropolitan Police dogs are very, very hard to obtain now. So all the work we conduct as a local authority, we would source our own privately. Isabella may help with it. I don't deal with the money side of it, but we just we do get that privately. I believe Wagtail is often widely used throughout many council boroughs. So, and it's an excellent resource. And as I say, without repeating myself, it's something which I really truly believe in, and it does achieve great results. We try to do them blocks of maybe 1 day, or we can 2 days at a time, and that achieves that. And I've forgotten the second question. I do apologise. Could you just give me a point?
About the pharmaceuticals that
are
not.
Yes. Pharmaceuticals. I think it's a classic case, really. It's obviously out there. I think it has decreased slightly, but I think if we were to target that and look for that, we will find it. That sounds like a negative way of answering the question, really, but there's certain areas in the borough. Isabella, do you want to jump in?
I can jump in now. It's actually to do both of the question, but in terms of the dog operations, Councillor Shaw, it's something that's led by our trading standards team, and over the past few years, as we have been doing with the licensing compliance team, we have been trying to grow our trading standards team as well. So at the same time as we appointed Mr. Edwards, we've also appointed an excellent trading standards team leader, and that officer, that team leader, has essentially been managing to secure external funding that funds that stream of work. because those dog operations are actually quite expensive. But because we get external funding, we started doing them more regularly. And just to kind of add to what Graham's been talking to you about the pharmaceuticals, it is a bit of a pure luck with what we found. And quite often, like with the last operation that Graham was talking about, because the amount of goods was so high, we didn't have any space left in our van. So pretty much we've maxed up on one premises, which is why we didn't continue to the other premises. So I have seen there's a couple of reports actually going to our legal team that does mention, obviously, that there was illegal medicines in there. So I'm not sure whether it's just that we haven't been funding it. It depends on the premises that we target, or is it on the decline. So I'm reluctant to answer that question because I simply don't have the answer to it at this stage.
Thank you, Isabella. That's very helpful. Any other question from anyone?
Thank you.
Who is that? C and Kim? Yes, Councillor Nagpal.
Thank you, Chair. Can I begin just by echoing your sentiments about the report? I think it was a fantastic report and very well presented. Thank you for that. I have two questions. You mentioned that the regulation around dog boarding has become quite tough. I also wanted to ask if we also regulate and license dog breeding facilities. And as a committee, we've had sight of visits to the sort of premises you've talked through in terms of alcohol and late night entertainment, but we've not really had sight of any visits to these types of facilities. Do you do many, and what are the results of them? And my second question is, you mentioned a few times that your team is quite small. Do you think we could benefit from expanding the team? Is there scope, capacity and a need for expanding the team? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Nagpal. The second question I'm going to leave to my head of service, Isabella, because she will update you on that. To answer your first question, were you specifically referring to late night refreshment venues for late night visits? Could you just clarify that?
My first question was around licensing dog boarding and dog breeding facilities, and if you visit them and what the results of those visits might be.
Yes. Okay.
Would you like me to take that question? I can answer both of the questions for Councillor Nagpal. That might be easier. In terms of the dog breeding, yes, you're right. We do license them. We do carry out visits. The way that the legislation is scheduled, we require a qualified, essentially a vet or a qualified animal inspector. At the moment, that service is outsourced to City of London because we don't have any of the inspectors that have that course. One of the licensing officers working for Mr. Edwards is actually through that course, so hopefully we'll have that service in-house. So those inspections are freely available, and you can actually see the outcomes of those inspections on our webpage, because each premises that gets visited gets awarded a score out of 5, I think, from memory. But it's not something that comes to you because obviously you as the licensing committee normally hear matters in dispute. Those ones we've had quite an important case, I think a couple of years ago, which we have gone to the tribunal. You might have seen some information on it in terms of our comms team, but it's not something that would naturally come to you unless there is that dispute in terms of we haven't granted the license, and they would come to you to kind of decide. In terms of the resources, I was smiling as you asked that question because the answer to that is always going to be a yes. I could do with tripling, I think, Mr. Edwards' team, and we would have enough work for that team to carry out. We have been focusing on trying to get more resources, which is why Mr. Edwards kind of highlighted the Public Health Fund that we've managed to secure. And as a result of some of the work with Mr. Edwards and in general as part of the kind of budgetary constraints, etc., we have actually managed to now secure additional funds, and Mr. Edwards is in the process of recruiting. So hopefully in the next couple of months we will have another officer. The idea is that the more officers actually we have, the more income we can bring and generate, because obviously our licensed premises are paying license fees which essentially fund the service. And Mr. Edwards already highlighted that the last time that they done some visits, they found another 3 venues that were unlicensed, and essentially now 2 of them are part of the system and they're paying the fees. So we're hoping to grow that team even further, but just to kind of reassure you, there's something obviously that we're very much aware of. Budgetary constraints are there, but there is already 1 officer that is being currently recruited too.
Thank you, Isabella. Anyone else wants to ask any question? Okay, there is no more questions. So yeah, Councillor Sharma and Councillor Baklini. Councillor Sharma first.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, you mentioned that the main focus is compliance. I just wondered what are the key strategies you use to promote compliance?
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you.
Sharma. I think I would say the key tools for getting compliance is what I alluded to in the presentation, is early interaction. It's getting in there when you see a problem, when a problem is highlighted, when a problem becomes apparent, is interacting early, setting good, robust action plans, working with the venue to ultimately achieve the goal of compliance. I would add, like I said earlier about the review mechanism, the review should not really be a surprise. Of course, there are instances when a review is a surprise, when the Metropolitan Police bring possibly a summer review, for instance, or sometimes it's just unavoidable. But a review shouldn't come as a surprise. There should be plenty of evidence building, interaction, support, help to try and get to the venue in the place where we achieve a compliance. Would you like to add anything further to that, Isabella? I don't know whether hopefully I've covered that.
No, that's fine. Thank you for mentioning further details. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baklini.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to put on record my utmost thanks to Isabella and to our enforcement officers for their efforts in tackling all illicit goods and making our borough even more safe, and also helping everyone upholding the licensing objectives. And I don't have any questions, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor McKinney. Yes, appreciated.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands. So in that case, thank you, Graham. Thank you very much for your report. And as I said, your knowledge is reflected in the report, and it's a very good report. Thanks for that. So we move on to the next item. That is a gambling licensing policy update. And if the committee agree tonight, then this policy draft will go for consultation. So I'm going to hand over to Isabella. And Isabella, whenever you want to pass to Jeff, you can let me know which part Jeff is going to present. So then Jeff can start. So Isabella, over to you, please.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. And it might be the best actually to bring our analyst, Mr. Jeffrey Lister, at the very end of me just introducing that report. So tonight, obviously, our item number 2 is the new renewal of our statement of gambling policy, and it's something that we've been talking about for I think at the last couple of committee meetings. And with the report, you were provided with the very first draft of that refreshed policy. You would see that whilst the policy does look significantly different, there are actually minimal changes proposed to the actual wording of the policy itself. Therefore, as Councillor Ahmed highlighted, we are asking the committee to approve this draft today and to instruct us to proceed with the statutory consultation. In terms of the consultation, we'll be taking a twofold approach. First, in line with the Gambling Commission guidance that we have to follow, we will consult our responsible authorities. So that includes the police, the Gambling Commissioner, the local safeguarding and children and public health, as well as our existing license holders, trade associations and resident groups. To consult more widely, we are also proposing to carry out online consultations, which we haven't done in the past, so we'll be interested to see what we hear from our residents as well. We imagine that the consultation process will take approximately 8 weeks. And in addition to the consultation, we have also very recently appointed a very experienced former Gambling Commissioner inspector to deliver a targeted inspection program for us. So that work will be carried out at the beginning of February and finished approximately at the beginning of March. And we will be focusing on inspecting our higher risk gambling premises. So we're hoping that following that inspection program, and we will have a report summarizing hopefully plenty of consultation responses and outcomes of our inspection program, and a revised draft of our policy if needed for your consideration in April. And just as a reminder, the policy must be adopted by the full council by 1st of June of this year to ensure that we meet the statutory publication requirements. Turning back to the policy, perhaps the most significant new element is our work on the local area profile. And I know I've introduced that item at the last committee, but essentially this is our first attempt at identifying areas of highlighted risk of vulnerability to gambling-related harm. So the local area profile, LAP in short, it follows a similar approach to the cumulative impact assessment exercise that you'll be very familiar with from the Licensing Act perspective, but it is a lot less prescriptive, it's a lot more flexible and a lot more open for interpretation, as we might cover today. There's essentially not as much as information on it as it is for licensed under the Licensing Act 2003 premises. These local area profiles are not mandatory at all. So the plan is that it will sit as a standalone updatable document on our webpage. And our revised policy at the moment, it will simply refer to it, and we will draw the applicant's attention to these areas where we believe there are specific risk, and we will be, hopefully the committee will be seeing a lot more comprehensive local risk assessments that are provided to you, which reflect those local risks. And as part of the work on the area profile, we have looked at various specific risk factors. Some of them are easy to map, some of them are not. But again, that's what our analysts will take you through in a second. And we will also be asking our gambling inspector to focus when they visit the premises to identify whether there's any problem gamblers in the areas, because that's the information we don't have at the moment. So I think with that context in mind, it might be best if I pass over to you, Jeffro, and then you can take the committee through what we've done so far.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. If you bear with me a second, I'll just share my screen and launch the. Does that come up?
Yep.
Oh, brilliant. And I should be able to make it bigger. Okay. So we have started to look at, and in some areas quite a long way into, in some areas we're still waiting for some data, different things that we can assess in order to try and come up with a local area profile, as Isabella says, in a similar way to the licensed premises and the cumulative impact approach to that. So this first map is basically, to start with, just look at what sort of gambling premises we've got in Ealing and where they are. So this shows all of the adult gaming centres, all of the betting shops, all of the mostly pubs, but also some cafes with alcohol licenses, and also a licence for gambling machines, and also clubs with machines. Clubs tends to be smaller premises. Sometimes they've got a particular interest. They may be affiliated to a particular group or interest, or snooker or other activity. So there's 148 in Ealing at the moment, and those are shown on the map. They're colour coded, so you can pick out those, and you can see that sort of over half are pubs with licenses for machines in there. Also, I put the town centres on there, and the town centres will stay on most of the maps here, but it starts to show the concentration that we have in and around our town centres. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just an observation, and it's something to bear in mind when we're coming to develop policy and sort of update that and provide information to people potentially applying for licences. So there are, in the sort of West Ealing continuum there along the Uxbridge Road, there are 24 premises, there's 13 in Acton, there are 11 within the Southall town centre, 11 within Greenford and 7 in Hanwell. Those town centres are the same town centres that are used by Economic Regen and their town centre projects. So I think they were updated in 2002, 2003, so they're relatively recent, and they're currently the areas that are designated as town centres. If we look just at so obviously different types of premises, but particularly the sort of adult gaming centres, which are like the slot machine arcade places and betting shops, which people are more familiar with. If we look at those by themselves, again, we see a very quite considerable concentration in and around the town centres. So half of all betting shops, so that's 48 in the borough, and there are 24 within the 5 town centre areas shown. And 11 of the 12 adult gaming centres are located within those areas too. There's one that sits out just south in Southall, but again shows very much the concentration within our sort of busier retail and commercial centres. We can also look at things like the distribution of those gambling premises as a sort of thematic map, because that helps us sometimes if we're going to identify areas or produce policy that's related to geography. It helps to kind of have an overview of that, because the dots on maps it's fine, but it's actually can be harder to take in than something which is a little bit more colourful and easier to absorb. So the map there shows each LSOA, and these have been weighted by the volume and the type of gambling premises present. So given a higher score for gaming centres, slightly less for betting shops, and then lower levels for machines in licensed premises and machines in clubs, basically looking at the impact of and the opportunity and the ability for people to gamble within those areas. And you can see very much that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sort of LSOAs that glow red on that assessment, where they have a higher level of a number of premises there, and also quite a lot of the borough which doesn't have any or has very few. So it kind of produces a picture. Also, you can start to see the areas outside of those town centres which do have higher levels, so between sort of Hanwell and West Ealing, and then little bits of South Ealing, also the southern stretch of Southall, and then a couple of areas up in sort of North Alton, North Greenford, but they're spread much thinner than they are within those town centre areas. Talking with Isabella, we looked at deprivation and trying to assess deprivation as an overall. Obviously there's lots of different measures for deprivation. Helpfully for us, the IMD 2025 has just been published, so that's a sort of up-to-date assessment that the ONS have put out that we can use to assess different types of deprivation. It's broken down into different domains, but there is an overall score. So here, this is a map looking at the overall deprivation. It's based primarily on the 2025 IMD overall score. We've given extra weighting to the domains that relate to employment, to income, to crime, and also to there's a particular submeasure where they look at income issues which affect children. So we've sort of given those a little bit of extra weighting. And we've also looked at some ACORN data. ACORN is it's a private source of data that is used quite widely in sort of economics and estate agency, but it provides a very specific low-level sort of small geography assessment of demographics, characteristics and affluence of particular areas, and sort of how those areas are thriving or not. And we're able to sort of put that into the data and then come up with an overall assessment of where the borough sits in terms of these are kind of the issues that we talked about as being potential signs of vulnerability and potential risks for gambling premises. It's not a particularly unusual map. Most of our deprivation looks similar to this when we map it. So certainly the west side of the borough has higher levels of deprivation, particularly areas of Southall and Northall, a little bit of sort of the Greenford up towards Pitshanger kind of area. Then we've got West Ealing, Acton, and then also North Acton. Now, it's not necessarily purely on affluence or income, but also can be like access to services and things. And I think that's quite often why North Acton shows up slightly higher. It is a developing almost town centre, and we may see that change in future. But at the moment, there's relatively poor access to services up there, which is why it shows up particularly in that area. And then we can then combine these two. So we've got the sort of the distribution of the gambling premises. We've also got the deprivation. And then if we look at the two together, we can kind of conduct further analysis and mapping that brings those into a single map that maybe, and this is open for discussion, and this will possibly form part of the policy, or maybe something that we keep and look at in future. But it kind of brings those together as high risk areas. So these are areas which combine some of the deprivation and vulnerability factors that we think could really be important, and then also where there are existing premises on a higher level, sort of a higher degree of gambling premises that are present there already. So this comes a little bit more back towards the town centre areas, but still highlights areas outside of the 5 town centre areas in Acton, so up towards North Acton Station, in Northolt along the Ruislip Road towards Greenford, and also the areas of Southall, sort of outside of the Broadway, particularly south of the railway line, as areas that could be of note. And if we were going to form a policy in the sort of cumulative impact type way, this is the kind of thing we would be looking at. I mean, there's also some other factors that we might look at. They're harder to factor in terms of assessing an area and producing a map, but they are at the same time could be something that might affect when people do apply for things. So this map shows the location of all the secondary schools in the borough, and it shows 300 metres around those. So the town centres of Greenford and Southall, and particularly Acton, are all very close to or contain sort of a school or adjacent to a school, or in Acton's case 3 schools. And the use of the buffer zone around that area is kind of to try and indicate where young people may see gambling premises, where that may be normalised, where they may pass them during their regular activities, such as their journeys to and from school. And again, this is about whether we want to potentially protect those areas or be particularly mindful of that if people do make applications. Another factor, and this data is, it hasn't been updated since for 5 months, so it's 5 months out of date, but it should be updated in the next month, I'm told. This is London Ambulance Service attendance to incidents which involve alcohol or drugs. Again, we'll see a prevalence of town centres in there because of the licensed premises and the concentration of licensed premises there, but it does give an indication of areas where there could be a particular vulnerability due to how people may think or behave differently when they are under the influence of drink or drugs, including in terms of their gambling habits. So again, another factor that's slightly more difficult. One of the reasons it's more difficult to include is because not only is it out of date, it's also on our old LSOA map, so they haven't updated the area that they use, so it makes it quite hard for in about half a dozen cases to try and map that to our new LSOAs. But it's still quite an interesting picture. And again, outside of the areas of the town centre, we've still got areas in sort of towards the north of Acton and around sort of Perivale and Pitshanger and in Northolt that are not town centre areas, but still come to factor quite highly on this measure. So that is basically where I'm ending. It's a kind of a whistle stop. I hope it hasn't been too fast, but it's kind of giving an indication of the areas of analysis and the areas of and the subjects and the way we're trying to assess vulnerability in order to formulate or make any changes to the policy. Isabella, you may well have things you want to add.
I think the only thing I'll add to it is that initially when we started to look at this data, we had very much an idea that we would develop similar map to the one that we've used for our licensed premises in terms of the alcohol licensing, where there are specific areas mapped available to you and all of the other applicants where we've seen the overlay of specific issues. With gambling, trying to identify vulnerability is a lot more complex, as you would have seen. So, for example, we know that having proximity of schools is something that we should be really focusing on, but as you would have seen on the map, it doesn't really overlay with some of the other information. So I think what we're looking to do at the moment is to provide all of the information that Mr. Lister just showed you into a document that essentially forms our local area profile. And that should then create a greater awareness for anyone that wishes to open a new betting premises or a new AGC. And it's something that then the committee could refer to if there was a hearing in terms of, has this proposed applicant looked at the risk of having a school close by, or being in a very deprived area, and comprehensively assessed it and then have adequate controls as part of the local risk assessments. So initially, like I said, we were thinking that you'll be giving little maps with the borders, but I think now we're taking an approach of providing all of that information, consulting on it, and also seeing what others think of that.
Thank you.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, Isabella. Very good report, no doubt, very comprehensive. Now, I've got a little question before I open to floor. We have to pass a resolution on no casino resolution. Now, how does that work? Is there any special method to pass that resolution, or is just a part of the policy?
So essentially what needs to happen is something that the committee should be recommending to, but it gets adopted by the full council. So we've had no casino resolution, I think, since 2012 now. And for those members on the committee that are not familiar with it, it's essentially if someone wanted to open a full-on casino, and we are talking here about proper casino, not somewhere where there's a few slots, we would return that application stating that there is currently no casino resolution in the borough, which would essentially prevent that application from being made. And it's also something that will be widely consulted on, because I remember the last committee, one of the councillors, I think it might have been Councillor Anand, has raised it as a question, is this something that we still want in the borough? So that'll be one of the questions as part of the consultation, especially the online consultation that hopefully our residents will respond to. And then based on those responses, I'll be then making a suggestion to the committee whether I believe we should be passing it on or whether we shouldn't be, and then the committee will be deciding on what the recommendation is.
Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to open to floor, and Councillor Anand first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the first report. I didn't say anything at that time, and the second report. Thank you for the hard work. I just want to ask one question here. Two questions actually. What is the work we have done with vulnerability and impulsive gambling, i.e. with the mode change that's happening, there are prime spots in the high street that are actually now getting vacant, and it's a very prominent place where next to bus stops. What work have you done with the impulsive gambling of people having a vulnerability and waiting at a bus stop when there's right next to them is a betting shop? Have we done any work on that to see whether there is any correlation or link between bus stops and betting shops? Because if you see a lot of locations within our borough, and not only our borough, other boroughs, where betting shops are located strategically next to bus stops. So have we done any work there with regards to that? And thank you very much, Isabella, for remembering that I did say that we should have an open policy with gambling, and we should not strictly say no. And thank you for remembering that point and putting it on the consultation. So I just want to ask, what work have we done? Because I feel there is a lot of correlation between betting shops and their locations next to bus stops. Thank you.
Thank you. Isabella, you want to come on that?
I'm trying to think what the answer to it is, because as I alluded to early on, mapping actually areas of vulnerability is extremely complex. Even things such as highlighting where we have problem gamblers, there is simply no information out there that we could tap into. proximity of bus stops and kind of impulsive gambling. So there is data, for example, to suggest that the reason why we are including schools is because younger people, adolescents, have a lot more impulsive, non-controlled behavior, which is why there's a justification to look at schools. I'm not aware of anyone looking into bus stops. I can see obviously Councillor Annan's thinking behind it. I can see our analyst nodding his head as well. It's definitely something that we can look into and we can present at the next committee, but it's not something that I'm aware that anyone actually highlighted as a specific risk for gambling, despite me actually agreeing with the whole principle behind it. And I can see that our analyst wants to come on the back of that as well.
Yeah, just really quickly, it's just around the bus stops. It's definitely something we could look at. One thing to bear in mind is that we've effectively got 4 or 5. The Oxford Road effectively chains together 4 or 5 linear town centres for us, with lots of bus stops, because we're really fortunate that the borough is really well served with buses, so that there are a lot of gambling premises along that main road, and they will almost inevitably be close to bus stops. So it might be that we need to look at something very specific in terms of maybe the AGCs, or maybe the way that they display things in windows. But there's inevitability that there will be quite a high proportion of our premises are going to be close to bus stops, because everywhere along there is close to bus stops.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to it is for to Councillor Anand is that obviously if there is any applications, and we haven't had any recently, I think the last one was about a couple of years ago, it is up to the community to be satisfied that the proposed license holder will be upholding the objectives. And if that is something that is picked up as part of the application, then that's obviously where the committee can come in place and ask whether that's been considered as part of the local risk assessments, which the operators are obliged to provide to you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharma, you raised your hand, or you're okay?
Yes, no, yes, I did. Sorry, I've looked at. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for the first report as well. Sorry, I didn't mention it earlier on, and for the second report, and also to thank you for all the hard work that you're doing. And it's all been very informative and helpful. I just wanted to know, with all the data that you've shown, Jethro, and mentioned, can you go into further details on how it has been used to protect the most vulnerable? What kind of things have been done from the patterns that you've established, and what kind of things can we be focusing on in the future? Thank you.
I think this is possibly a question for Isabella Moore. In terms of my involvement, yeah, it's really been data crunching over the last few weeks and turning that into maps. So either side of Christmas, the actual deprivation data didn't become available until late in November. So it really is hot off the press. So I don't think it's actually been used yet in order to affect any change. Isabella, in terms of it's the impact of what we're going to do with this now, do you have any sort of, I guess this is the process of doing the policy review?
Yes, so I think in terms of what we're doing it's essentially what we're doing is looking at the borough in a more strategic way to try to identify areas of local concern, and then making it very clear to any proposed new operators that this is where there are problems. So they should be really thinking very comprehensively about where they'll be opening new premises and what controls might be needed. Gambling, it's a hugely complex area, and as you'll be aware, quite a lot of the gambling issues actually stem from the online premises rather than land-based. That's not to say that obviously there isn't, but part of us focusing perhaps more closely on the gambling in general is us getting that ex-gambling commissioner and doing very detailed, very structured inspections, which I don't think we've done probably in the last decade to that extent. So that is something that I'll be updating you on the next committee, and is again something that will be interesting for us to see. Are there any issues? What should we be focusing on? And that will feed into the local area profile and also our licensing policy.
Thank you. The next one is Councillor Mahmood.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions, but while I'm just listening the last answer of Isabella, thank you, Isabella, and all the work and putting all the information together. When you said Gambling Commission will be introducing some new information for helping the subcommittee meeting, and I just realized that the one of the recommendation of a Gambling Commission is when we will be considering gambling license. So the cumulative effect element will not be considered. So I'm just wondering, while we will be making decision as a subcommittee, so in terms of so many gambling premises or cumulative effect should not be considered. So I just wanted a clarification on that. And second is, I am a bit more clarity about the bingo premises. I can see in your report you are mentioning bingo can be played in any bingo premises, any licensed bingo premises. So I think the bingo can be played anywhere. So do we need, or the premises needs to have a license for bingo? For example, our own premises, like our community center, our children's centers, or whatever. So I just want to know more clarification. And you know, the most of the premises where bingo can be played can be accessed to the children as well. So so can we play bingo with the presence of children, and how we could be separate? Is it something defined in our new policy? Thank you, Chair.
Isabella?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Councillor Mahmood. So in terms of your first question, which relates to, as I understand, to the cumulative impact in terms of I presume the number of premises in a specific area. So the committee is entitled to and should be questioning anything that is related to the 3 licensing objectives. So obviously, if there is a high concentration of, let's say, betting shop in a small area, and there's another one that is opening up, and that is also in one of our most deprived areas in the borough, then that's where the community should be asking questions, and our responsible authorities, so the police, our licensing team, they should be even asking that question before that application comes to you. And the operators, as I stated, they have to carry out local risk assessments, and they have to be provided as part of the applications. So that should be covered even before it comes to you. But as I said, as long as it is relevant to the 3 licensing objectives, you as the committee are entitled to ask the question that you think are relevant. So hopefully that answers your question. In terms of the bingo premises, and I put my hands up in here, I'm definitely not a gambling expert, so I simply don't fully know the question in terms of whether a children's centre needs to have a bingo license, that maybe Mr. Edwards can come into it. I understand that obviously it won't be as a one-off, you have to do it, but there are very complicated rules in terms of the bingo premises. So if you're okay with that, Councillor Mahmood, I'm happy to pass that over to Mr. Edwards before I actually take that away.
You're right, Isabella, it's complex. Without going into too much detail, because I'm by no means an expert on it either, but it's complex. The Gambling Commission, if it's all to do with private gaming, or whether it's non-commercial, commercial, if there's an alcohol license, for instance, a premise, my recollection, can have bingo, arranged bingo, as long as it's a free entry, as in no stake, doesn't include the stake. And I think the prize fund it's limited to a certain amount, I believe around about £2,000 or something like that. So it's a bit of a vague answer, but Isabella's right, it's complex. We would certainly need to get the Gambling Commission's advice on where we go, and maybe I could assist and provide that a bit further clarity on the next meeting.
Yeah, I would suggest, Councillor Mahmood, I'm happy to email you more information about it separately to this meeting, because I want to know the answer to that essentially too. So I'll be emailing you separately if that's okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Thanks. Councillor Ball.
Great, thank you. Yes, well, I'm happy to associate myself with the thanks to the whole team that other members have done. That's great. In terms of the question, so one of the justifications for not making larger changes this time was the anticipated changes due to gambling reform, and I wondered what really stacks up there, because clearly that there were some changes have already been made as a result of the white paper, and some of the things which government are talking about are things like sort of technical things about designing the machines and so on, or they're online things which aren't applicable. So what would be likely to come in the gambling reform space that would be likely to you know, get in the way if we were trying to change this, you know, to have sort of yeah, I mean, so basically, yeah, what is likely to, what change is likely to happen that would justify that reasoning?
Thank you, Councillor Ball. So yes, you're correct, and I've covered that, I think, at the last licensing committee, that essentially we're not proposing any significant changes, because there is the white paper that was passed on, which states that there will be significant reforms to gambling. My understanding still very much is that that will be mainly targeted at the online gambling sector, now that the land-based premises. Having said that, there have already been, and you might have seen it, some statutory changes to do with land-based premises. They don't affect our premises because it just doesn't. Some of it has been reflected to our policy. But in terms of what happens next, we have to wait and see, because for us to make sure that we operate legally, all of the changes that come in, they have to essentially be made statutory instruments. Until they are made those statutory instruments, there isn't any reason for us to be amending any of our policy. The good thing is, despite us essentially doing the updates of our statement of gambling policy every 3 years, is that we can update it at any point. So now we have to pass it on by June, as I said, because otherwise the committee essentially would be operating without a valid statement of licensing policy, which would present a significant risk. But if there is any changes that are introduced, let's say in December of this year, then there's nothing stopping us from revising our statement of policy again. In terms of what's happening in the futures, I've attended the gambling conference in November, and I've asked a very specific question, because you might be aware that there's been, for example, a gambling levy imposed on some of the gambling premises, and I've asked the question, is that money going to be then distributed back to local authorities, perhaps for us to have greater resources and greater powers in terms of inspecting our gambling premises? But unfortunately, there wasn't anything concrete that was given at that conference, so there isn't anything that I can share with you. The only thing I have picked up from that conference is that there was very much a bit more of a kind of appetite and a highlighting of local area profiles, which is again why we are doing it now. In some way, it's an anticipation perhaps of a similar thing coming into force as it is with the Licence Act premises, where there is those statutory cumulative impact assessments and statutory standing to the special policy areas. Because the local area profile that we've been discussing with Mr. Lister is just purely to inform our applicants. It doesn't actually have any statutory standing behind it, whereas, as you know, in Licensing Act 2003, if something is in a special policy area, then that bar is a lot higher. So unfortunately, I can't give you any specifics, but it is unfortunately something that we just need to wait and see what happens.
Well, thank you. So it was very helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. The next one is Councillor Bland.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I do apologise to Graham. My computer crashed out when you were giving your report, but I heard some of it. It was excellent, and particularly about dog boarding, because that's something I've actually got in my ward. But thank you very much, and thank you, Jethro, for your report too. Thank you, Isabella. It's very important, actually, because gambling is something we don't think about enough, because most of the hearings we sit on obviously are not about gambling. They're about alcohol licensing, and so it's actually very useful to think about this. I've just got a couple of questions with regard to casinos, which I personally don't think casinos are as harmful as some other types of gambling, but I'm sure I'd be totally outvoted on that. If there was a request and it was then rejected because the borough has a presumption against any casinos, is there any higher authority that can be appealed to? And I don't think there is, but I just didn't know that. And the other question is a completely open-ended one. What is happening with gambling? What's increasing? What do you see as the kind of increasing elements that if you're looking into the crystal ball next 5 years, 10 years, what are we going to see more of in land-based gambling?
Yeah.
Okay,
Isabella?
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gallant. In terms of the no casino resolution, you're correct. If someone has applied for it today, because we do have that resolution, as I said, we would essentially return that application. In terms of the authority, the good thing about the no casino resolution is that it can be revoked at any time. So personally, since I've been managing the licensing team, and I think in the past 5 to 10 years, we haven't had anyone even expressing an interest in opening a casino. And what I would imagine it would happen is, or it should happen, if someone is proposing to open a casino in Ealing, they would very much be engaging with us from the start. And that's where we could still bring it to the committee and say, should the committee be actually recommending to the full council that that casino resolution is essentially revoked. I remember I've looked at it with our legal team, and it's quite highly unprescribed, I would put it in that way, as in we could literally decide to revoke it tomorrow. But as I said, this is something that we'll be doing the public consultation on, and we'll be interested to see what happens with it. I'm completely open-minded, as I think most of the committee is, as to kind of which way this goes. So we'll see. In terms of the looking to the future, the 5 years, I personally see, and this is kind of probably Mr. Edwards again can come on the back of it, is, but we are seeing more premises operating as adult gaming centres, and that's something that is definitely on the rise. And part of the inspection programme that will commence in February will be actually assessing whether the premises are, for example, bingo premises on a licence, but actually essentially an AGC, adult gaming centre. So you might recall, actually, there was a planning case, I think not that long time ago, about a year ago, which was actually refused, but it was essentially going to be an AGC. It didn't come to the committee because, like I said, they haven't received their planning permission, but that's personally where I think this is heading, that we'll be seeing less betting shops because it is moving predominantly online. And when you look at the number of our licensed premises, in the last 10 years, well, sorry, there's a bit of an echo there. The betting shops, there was a big drop about 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, and since then it's stable. But actually, our adult gaming centres have gone up compared to 10 years ago. So that's where I think this is heading. But this is my best guess, and I'll just hand back to Mr. Edwards to see where he thinks this is developing.
Well, to be honest, Isabella, I agree with you that it is going that way. There's a more prevalent for that, and I think the traditional betting shop, as you've already described, is reducing, isn't it? And I think over the days, I think you've explained it very well. I don't really have much further to add. I agree. That's where we're going. I think that's where we're heading.
Thank you. And in the series of questions or speakers, last but not the least, Councillor Bakilini.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Isabella, for taking all the time to produce such an efficient and important policy. My question is regarding identifying problematic gamblers. Will operators have a system to identify them, and will the committee be able to have access onto this identification process or records in case of any review or revocation applications?
Thank you, Councillor Bakilini. As always, it's a very valid question you've asked there, and you always seem to be reading my mind. So this is actually a conversation that I had with our analysts this morning, where we were trying to find a way where we can assess problem gamblers. In an online world, it's a lot easier because if you can actually self-report yourself and blog yourself from a specific web page. There are ways to obviously go around it, from what I understand, but it's a lot more difficult, and you actually have to be actively looking into it. From a land-based perspective, according to the Gambling Commissioner's guidance, that all of their gambling premises, including our licensed ones, have to adhere to is they have to have a system in place which tries to identify problematic gamblers. So they should be things like that staff has been trained, and if there is someone that sits there every day, all day, that there is kind of some kind of intervention there. And the premises also have to have logs, and also people should be allowed to self-exclude themselves from the premises. So it's something that the family can come with a person and say, I've got a problem, you need to make sure that I'm excluded. They provide the picture, everything obviously needs to be compliant with the data protection, but they need to have systems in place. And again, this is something that, especially in our areas where we've got loads of gambling premises, the committee should be asking about how robust are your procedures in that area. And again, because we don't have enough data on it, this is something what our specialists will be focusing on going forward with our inspections.
Thank you. I've got two more hands, Councillor Mahmood and then Councillor Shaw. Councillor Mahmood first.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to come back again. I thought there's something is missing with in the last full licensing committee meeting. You mentioned you present the figure like alcohol and gambling related hospital admissions, and we realized that on that report the Ealing Council was on the top in terms of hospital admission. I'm just wondering, is it the still case, or have we improved on that point? And second thing, Isabella, you said a couple of times the gambling levy. So don't you think this is the right time, by looking at the deprivation, by looking at antisocial behavior around betting or gambling shop, don't you think this is the right time to engage with the betting shops and the big companies? They have got many outlets in our borough, to remind them their social corporate responsibility, to remind them to come together and do some sort of contribution in terms of reducing the deprivation and antisocial behavior and hospital admission rate. I think they should take some responsibility as well in terms of their contribution. So don't you think we should be thinking on that point as well?
Thank you, Councillor Mahmood. So in terms of the alcohol-related hospital admissions, yes, you are correct. From memory, I think we were in the top 3 of London boroughs, which obviously it wasn't a good thing. I don't have any update on that. From what I understand, obviously that data takes a bit of time to be collected. If there is an update to that, I'll be happy to bring that to the committee, because it is obviously something that is relevant not only to the alcohol licensing, but also to the gambling licensing as well. So I haven't got an update. I don't think there is an update, but I will look into it. But as I said, I will update you as soon as I hear. In terms of the gambling levy, that gambling levy has already been imposed on gambling premises, from what I understand, and I have actually asked at the conference in regards to the that was run by the Gambling Commission, what is going to happen with that money, because that money is at the moment proposed to be obviously reinvested back into prevention and helping people that have problem with gambling. And I was very surprised to hear that actually Gambling Commission had nothing to do with it. That money was collected by the government, from what I understand, and at the moment it was still in the planning process of how that money is going to be spent. But whether I agree with the fact that we should be engaging our premises and we should be reminding them of social responsibility, absolutely, and that is something that our gambling inspector will be doing as part of the inspections.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things, a couple of comments. First of all, thank you for this draft report. I know we've seen it previously. It's really taking a great shape, I think, and particularly helpful. I really appreciated the maps that are put in, showing, you know, the concentration of premises and the effect and the cumulative impact. I think that's really helpful for everybody on the committee. Now, just going back to Isabella referred back to, you know, what was quite a controversial planning application for an adult gaming centre, or AGC. I'll use the lingo, and it was, you know, it in that case it sort of fell into a little bit of a grey area. was my view in that the planning was sort of, well, it's just a planning application, and how does it fall within the licensing? You know, that actually it was more a licensing responsibility for this. Now, this was primarily slot machines. You know, it was going to just be premises with slot machines for people to go in and play, and this is the direction, you know, and I know that Graham mentioned that this is the direction it seems to be going, with a decline in betting shops as well. So the question really is, you know, with the residents' feedback, and certainly from this case in Hanwell, certainly, you know, there was overwhelming community rejection of this going forward. You know, could something be put in place similar to the casino, where there is a sort of a presumption to decline AGCs in the future? Or, you know, is there something within a sort of a special policy area where we could say, well, the cumulative impact of this, because of the concentration of premises in the area, will lead us to sort of presume to decline this as a license?
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. So gambling licensing works effectively mirrors the Licensing Act that you are very familiar with, which is any objections on any reservations have to be directly relevant to the gambling, the three gambling objectives. Overwhelming presumption against because people don't like it, unfortunately, it doesn't come within the three licensing objectives. So unless the residents could, and obviously we haven't had that hearing, so we don't know, we're just stipulating here, but if there were legitimate concerns that would fall within one of those three or more than one objectives, then that would obviously come to the licensing committee for you to decide. There is nothing in the legislation that would allow us to say, no, we can't have any more AGCs. Again, the legislation in terms of gambling works very similar to the Licensing Act, as in we've got our licensing policy. So if we do see that there is issues with AGCs in the borough, and again, this kind of inspection regime is going to be very informative for us, then there's nothing stopping us stating it very strongly in our licensing policy that we believe there is an issue, justify why, and explain what controls we would be expecting from proposed applicants. But there's nothing under the Gambling Act or nothing under the Licensing Act either that would just say a blank no, you cannot apply for it because you'll be rejected. Or what we could do is just raise that bar a lot higher and just say to people that you will have to have very comprehensive controls in place because of some of the information that we're seeing. And this is why we're essentially doing that local area profile to start informing future applications if there are any.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabella.
That's very helpful.
I think,
yeah.
Is that okay, Councillor Shaw? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see any other hands, so we've come toward the end of the session. And before we end, the first report on enforcement and hearings was for noting, so I take it as committee has noted that. However, the second one is for the committee to endorse the approach and agree to instruct the officers to proceed to the consultation. So can I ask the committee to confirm if they agree to the approach and instruct the officer to go for consultation?
Agreed.
That's
Agreed.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yep.
Thank you. Well, in that case, we have come to the end of the meeting. Thank you, officers, for your work that you are doing. Committee is really appreciative of the work you have done, and you have seen that in the meeting, members have commended the reports. So with that, thank you for attending, and have a good rest of the evening. The meeting is now closed.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.